Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. The provincial elections in Iraq give the country's political process a new impetus and millions of Iraqis hopes of better days ahead. While it's premature to talk of spectacular change in the political landscape, the grip of religious-based parties has been loosened, and Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has surged ahead of his rivals. Political analysts predict if secular and nationalist parties succeed in creating a progressive bloc, Iraq then will be on the road towards democracy and will reclaim its 7 decades of secular progress.
More Iraqis appear to be turning their backs on religious-based political parties, widely blamed for stoking sectarian tension in the country and failing to deliver basic services. Early indications of the provincial elections show that Iraqis, battered by many years of horrific sectarian bloodshed, have opted for secular and nationalist parties to lead them. More than 7 million Iraqis went to the polls, compared to less than 500,000 in the 2005 elections, when many stayed away to protest the US occupation of Iraq and for fear of violence by Sunni extremists. Unlike the previous elections, Sunni voters came out in large numbers to have their voices heard through the Awakening Councils, which helped force al-Qaeda out of Iraq. Tribal leaders also made big gains in western Iraq. Political analysts see the results as an early referendum of Prime Minister al-Maliki's credibility and could correct some of the political imbalances of the 2005 election. Al-Maliki, who was once criticised for lack of leadership, appears to have strengthened his hold on the central government and taken control of Baghdad and Basra, Iraq's 2 largest cities.
If al-Maliki really wants to rebuild this country, he will have a great chance to achieve this task. But if he doesn't listen to the voices of opponents of the political process, especially the armed resistance, then he will not only fail, but the whole country will fail with him.
The non-violent elections and peaceful transfer of power in Iraq may determine how soon President Obama can keep his pledge of withdrawing US troops from the country. But despite the current optimism, critics warn it's too early to be confident that the outcome of this election will be repeated in the parliamentary elections in December.
To discuss the political implications of the provincial elections in Iraq, I'm delighted to welcome from Baghdad Maysoon Aldamuji, a member of the Iraqi parliament, and from London, Mundher Adhami of King's College London. Welcome to Inside Iraq. Maysoon Aldamuji, let me start with you. You must be delighted with the process. Very little violence to talk about, perhaps a few allegations of fraud, that it will be investigated. The turnout is not bad. Your Iraqi nationalist did very well. Are you happy with the results?
Not really. Well, I'm pleased that it all went well without any violence, and people were free to elect whoever they felt was the most suitable for this position. However, I was hoping for more democratic and secular figures to come forward, that we would have more percentages than we did. However, I think the Iraqi nationalists did well in Baghdad and Diyala, Anbar, Salahuddin, and many other regions. I am pleased, though, with the turn of the change that people feel towards politics in Iraq. I think we have past a very critical stage, and we are beginning to see a new stage in Iraqi politics. This was evident in Karbala, for instance, where one independent individual won more votes than any other political party, even those with far more funding and resources than he has. And also in Mosul, the trend was toward Arab nationalism, away from
yes.
Sectarian, and religious parties. I think there's a difference in the outlook of Iraqis towards how Iraq should be governed.
Mundher, is this a break with the past? Why should we look at this election as if it has changed the political game? Is this a breaker with the past?
I don't think so at all. I'm going to disappoint you and say that you have swallowed whole a kind of information campaign, information operation by the occupation to portray this as another a milestone or something. These elections and so on are all spectacles made to create the impression of movement and to detract from the reality of Iraqi catastrophe. Iraq continues to be in real catastrophe. The Iraqi people are continuing to live in terrible conditions. And the whole talk, including in Al Jazeera, unfortunately, is about achievements and is about turns and impetus. You mentioned spectacular and so on. Iraqis have never been religious or sectarian or ethnic with tensions like that. They have never been. And now we are being told that they have passed through, they have defeated attempts by the occupation and the politicians who came with the occupation to sow sectarian divide and sow discord in the country.
What is it that you look at that gives you dissatisfaction? What is it in the election that we saw al-Maliki winning 8 provinces out of 9? We saw the tribes, we saw al-Sahwa, we saw the Nationalist Party, we saw the secularists coming to the fore, and we saw the recession, the receding of the religious parties. What is it in this outcome that does not give you hope?
This has nothing to do with hope. The hope is really in the fact that Iraq is resisting occupation and resisting these sectarian parties from the start. The fact that the politicians, the class of politicians who have been created by the occupation as professional people like lawyers who take up things not because of conviction but because they are winnable and they have good clients, they have taken up something which is acceptable to the Iraqi population. It's okay, it's good, but don't confuse that with real progress. The problem of Iraq is the problem of 6 or 5 or 6 million refugees, half of them inside the country and half of them outside. In all of the Iraqi governance in which elections have been held, there are refugees from other governorates. And outside there are half of the population outside are professionals.
Well, let me run this by Maysoon Aldamuji, whether these provincial councils that will be up to the task of resettlement of the Iraqi refugees, whether outside the country or inside the country. He has a grave reservation about the possibility as well as the capability of these councils.
These councils are to provide services for people. They do not run the general policies of the country, which is the task of parliament and government. The difference between, I agree with most of what he said, but the difference between him and me is that he lives in theory land and I live in Iraq. Iraqis, I agree, were never sectarian, but to claim that they were never religious, I am yet to see a proof of this. Iraq has problems, I agree, and big problems, and one of them is the occupation. But it does not mean that Iraq was Eden before the occupation came. These problems came out because of the occupation, and they have to be dealt with, and solutions will have to be found. I am not happy with Iraqi politics since 2003. I'm not happy with the parliament. I'm not happy with the way things turned out.
The problems in Iraq are entirely, at the moment, for the last 6 years, we're talking about 6 years, are entirely due to the occupation. The occupation came with the explicit aim of dismantling Iraq, and people, a lot of people, including sectarian parties, have joined in a kind of alliance with this aim, which is actually imperialist, colonialist, and Zionist. And the aim was to fragment Iraq. Well, it failed, and it failed.
You cannot, listen. Of course it failed. It failed because people like me refuse these policies.
People who are within the parliament actually were instrumental in approving a kind of constitution which is designed to fragment and demolish Iraq. The security arrangement, security agreement with the United States, and as part of the strategic and cultural and economic framework, which was passed by this parliament through a lot of manipulation. And these people are responsible for this. The people who are part of the political process are responsible. The occupation has produced this class of politicians who are actually now, they are fragmented and they are all playing around. If you talk about al-Maliki, let me tell you about al-Maliki. Up to recently, al-Maliki is part of an Islamic Da'wah party. He dropped the name of Islamic, and now he is secular.
On that thought, both Maysoon and Mundher, I'm going to have to take a break. We'll continue this discussion after the break. Stay with us.
We do not accept the claims that our nation wants secularism because our nation is Muslim, thus they want Islam. Jalaluddin al-Saghir, Iraqi Shia cleric.